Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me on today's show. I am your tour guide and host, Katy Bray. This is Live with the Lights On. We come to you on Monday mornings at 9 a.m., the perfect way to start your week. And I'm looking forward to today's show as I often am. I know that I say that often, but I'm really excited to talk to my guest, Dana Pharant. It's funny, I'm like, am I even saying her name correctly? Believe that I am. She's a dear friend, though, believe it or not. And she is a former dominatrix who has used everything that she learned in that world to create a life of her dreams, really, to manage a business, to develop a business, to be in relationship with her amazing husband. And I know that she has a lot of wisdom to share. And so I'm excited to talk to Dana today. There's a lot of things I talk about that we meet each other in a lot of really cool places. And sometimes our let's say opinions are not always the most popular. We're adding her in right now. Sometimes our beliefs are not the most popular, and yet we seem to have a lot of I don't want to say agreements. Dana, I'm welcome. I'm so happy that
Katy.
you're here. I'm just talking about how you and I meet in so many different places, and one of the things that I love about the way that we can talk to each other is you and I both have a lot of very unpopular beliefs.
No. Bit of a shit disturber type personality.
A little bit. And it's
a lot.
Obviously you're accustomed to kicking it up a little bit, maybe sometimes not, maybe even, dare I say, being alone a little bit in the way that you see things. And it's an interesting place to be. I know that I am there a lot. And so I will watch, it's funny, as I'm saying, I guess it's Wear Red Day. And as I put this top on, I was like, I bet Dana's going to wear red. That's her brand. But hey, shout out to Dana's brand. We're in red.
We're coordinated. See, this is it. Like, our brains are in sync. Our wardrobe's in sync. Like, really.
So good. I love it. I love it. But, it really is powerful to have just like a sister in the world who, I can just be in that place with. And I love the fact that you use your dominatrix vibe and history to have developed a business and a life that you desire in sync. No, that's so funny. Zeb is making funny comments through Live with the Lights On. We're not going to be talking about boy bands today. I mean, we could. That might get unpopular too, real quick.
Real quick. Let's alienate a few more people,
exactly.
shall we?
I know. Exactly. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But could you tell us a little bit about your story? And because it's so powerful, and I really think that people need to hear your story and understand the power of the choices that we make in life, no matter what path they take us down, even if it is, let's say, an unpopular path or an uncommon path, that really does help us yield the life that we desire, that it becomes some of our strengths and our greatest gifts. So I think you just have such an enormous wealth of wisdom to share. So can we just start a little bit with your history, your story?
Thank you. You're so good. Like, it just makes people feel so amazing to be in your space. You are
Thank you.
an incredible woman, which is why we click. We just, it's like that same vibe. So, yeah. So basically, I'll tell a bit of my story. Because the thing for most people is they don't get, why would I want to use the branding of the inner dominatrix? What does that have to do with business? This is, so many people, you say the word dominatrix and they immediately think sex, or they think, what Hollywood portrays as a dominatrix, and yet, forget that Hollywood portrays any profession so accurately, right?
Like a psychic? Do you mean like that too?
Like,
oh,
lawyers, cops, like, yeah, they just portray everybody so well. So basically in my journey, so I grew up in a cult, and with that experience, there was a lot of abuse and trauma that went on with that. And so when I left that, I really went in search of untangling that from my body, untangling it and figuring out who I was. And I really had to do a whole journey and exploration to figure out what I liked, what I didn't like, because I just had no, there was nothing outside of the cult for me. So, that was kind of this long piece, and I went through a lot of different therapies, a lot of different modalities. And then, I had this little niggle to try out kink. And I was a massage therapist at the time. That was my first profession. And I had a client who came in, and she disclosed to me that this is what she was involved with. And she was just so natural about it. And she really, she just wanted me to know so that we could talk openly, like, okay, I'm going to see bruises and marks on her body. We need to be able to talk about where were they so that I know medically what's going on. And then that just started the conversation, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is so intriguing. It was so fascinating, and she really explained it in the non-judgmental space that was so beautiful, that when I was finally able to explore that, I, of course, called her up, and I said, okay, I want to go to a party, and I dove headlong into this experience, and I started out in the submissive side. And what I didn't realize was going to happen was that I was actually able to recreate scenes from the abuse, from the trauma. But because we're crafting them, we were also able to script out a different outcome. And in that, really intense experiential situation, it's very powerful for untangling from the body. And so I was able to shed years of trauma and abuse that had happened in my body and come out feeling truly empowered. Not just like, oh, right, Rage Against the Machine kind of thing, but actually empowered. And then that, combined with the fact that I'm a healer by trade, I really wanted to take other people on this healing journey. And so that started my career path, secondary career path to becoming a dominatrix. And that again was like this process of changing who I was at this cellular level. I changed at the DNA level who I was, how I showed up, how I could hold a space, what it meant to actually be present for somebody else, what it meant to be in no judgment of somebody else. And that was the internalization for me. And then I know this is a long story, but
please, I love your story. It's so important.
Okay. I always feel sometimes I'm like, okay, and but the next piece of it is that, so concurrent to being a massage therapist, I also had a massage supply outlet. And so we had this, 7-figure business with staff and, people overseas and all the logistics and pieces going on with it. But we were at that point hitting a bankruptcy. And in going through that, it was a great wake-up call. And going through that, I realized that, here I have all this power and, strength and this confidence in my personal life as a dominatrix. But I wasn't bringing that into my business. And I realized that it was like that needed to come into the leadership of running my business, that energy, not the actual, whipping my clients.
Although sometimes probably tempting.
Very tempting. And there were some people, and then there were some people who probably would have really liked it.
Of course.
Different story. But that space of like really holding no judgment of my clients, having the willingness to stand in my expertise. So, bringing that into the store, I would stand in that expertise of like, what, I think you need this product because of this, and this is why, and this is what I see. And they would easily upsell because I was standing in that energy. I was, I wasn't attached to the outcome. I just stood holding that space for them. And my business would take off when I was really standing in that energy. And then of course, we're human. So I would,
Yeah.
let it slide and get all, my head up my ass. And then business would drop off. And then, okay, get back into it, business. And this repeated a few times. I'm like, this is really predictable. It's like flicking a light switch on and off. Really predictable.
Mm-hmm.
And I really got the message that I need to bring this inner dominatrix into the world. And particularly for me, my passion is women in business, because I see the need for women in particular to really own this archetype of the dominatrix, so that they really grow the business that they desire without making themselves wrong and having all that other crap that goes on in their heads. So it's a very long story to get through. For this is
but it's a beautiful story, and some people are just tuning in, so I just want to reiterate, you went from growing up in a cult to finding a lot of your healing as becoming a dominatrix and allowing yourself to explore that area of yourself. And what I think is really beautiful about your story, I mean, there's a lot of things that's beautiful about your story, but to me, it really just goes to show that our pathways of healing are so many and varied, as long as we choose it consciously. Like, I have known people who were drawn into the kink world because they had had a lot of abuse, but what they ended up doing was re-triggering a lot of that abuse. And it was more that it felt like, I'm supposed to be punished, I'm not good enough. It was sort of allowing the shadow side and the abuse to really continue and percolate, because that's what felt normal to them. But what I love in your story, and I know others who in a similar vein, where it becomes actually therapeutic and catharsis, because it's approached with such a degree of consciousness, where I'm reprogramming. I'm using what would normally maybe be perceived as pain or some kind of trigger as the alchemy and as that balm that I actually need to evolve and grow beyond it. And then to be able to use it in such a powerful and impactful way is like, wow, this is really part of my whole life message. I mean, from going from being in a cult to a dominate, like, it's amazing. Dana, you're amazing.
Yeah. And you really hit the nail on the head about the piece of like, it's, for me, a big part of this message is utilizing the pain that we have in our life, the quote unquote pain, right? There are a lot of things that we label as being painful or difficult, or, oh my God, I'll never get through this. And, I love bringing that experience, and it's more from my submissive side, that when you're in the scene and you are there, like, the idea is to surrender to the other person. You are to surrender. And we're consciously trying to surrender to the universe and surrender to the flow. So it's a great it's a metaphor, and it's like physical training. So you're surrendering, and if you resist, like if you tighten up and that flogger comes in, it hurts. It's like, it really hurts. But that same flogger applied when you actually relax and open up can be like this wave that crashes over you, and it can transform into something that's pleasurable. And that's the piece, is taking the pain and the crap that happens in our life, because we're not going to get away from it, but taking that and being able to transform it into something that works for us. It's beautiful, that we lean into. I mean, that's what I get really juiced about with this.
Yeah.
Because it's such a great metaphor for life.
It's such a great metaphor. And, the thing that, as you were talking, what came to me, it really is about, and I hadn't really thought about it like this until you said it the way that you said it, but just being able to be fluid between the submissive and the dominant, the fluid and the dominant, or the submissive and the dominant. A lot of people might say the feminine or the masculine, but I like hearing it that way, because I don't know, there is something a little bit more empowering to me about that, because I know for myself, and I know a lot of other women who have felt this way, that in my life, I tend to have to be on a lot, right? I do have to be in that dominant self. I need to produce, I need to go after this, I just demand and whatever. And so when I have the opportunity to settle into a softness and to sometimes just be told what to do, I love that. I mean, I've got two 16-year-olds in the house and they'll say, I don't know, well, what should I eat? What do you think? I'm like, I cannot possibly make any decisions for you. Like I can't. I not only do I not have the bandwidth to actually think for you what's going to taste best for you, you need to claim that yourself. Like I don't. So when I have someone say, this is where we're eating or this is what we're doing, I'm like, I can relax into that at the right time. At the wrong time, yes. If I'm in my dominant, it's like, no.
Oh yeah. Like I know I had, actually, it was funny because I had somebody who, he was like shocked that I don't have my own motorbike, that I ride the back of my husband's. And for me, that is my submissive time. Yes. I'm like, I love it. I don't, he's like, where do you want to go? I'm like, I'm just riding here. Like, it's not about me making the decisions. I'm just like breathing in the smells, checking out the sights. I don't have to pay attention, like, to the degree that he does.
Yeah.
And he loves it. He gets such a thrill out of it. So it's a great win-win for us to be doing that. But that is my time where it's like, I'm just going to chill, let go.
Absolutely. So the other thing, there's so many things. I'm probably going to say the other thing, like, I don't know, a good 30 times. I find it also to be very empowering and interesting that, take this with the honor and love and reverence that I mean. I think when people conjure up the idea of a dominatrix, I don't know that you would be their image.
I do know what you mean. Yes.
Similar to me in the work that I do. They're like, what? Yeah. But what I love about that, and why I feel like that's actually almost one of the most valuable pieces, is that just you by example, you just showing up, teach others that, like I could be that. I can do that too. Right? It's not like I'm looking at this holier than thou or something that I don't relate to, right? Like if I look at it, let's say what people might conjure the image of a dominatrix up, I'm not going to personally, I don't relate to that. I don't resonate with that as much. But when I look at someone like you and you're like in your power, your energy is very strong and very right here, it's like, oh, that gets my attention. I resonate. That calls to me. That speaks to me. And so I think it's almost like divine poetry that you are packaged the way that you're packaged, because it's such a beautiful reminder of this could be you too, if that's what you want, if that's what you choose.
Yeah. And I love that. Thank you for honoring that. It's intentional and not intentional. So this is how I want to show up. And I do want to express that thing of that being fierce, what I call fierce, is not about being harsh. So I don't need to look the part of the dominatrix to be that. It's the energy that is held, and you nailed it. It's like, how do I show up in my body? Like when people see me on stage, or they get to experience, then they get it because they can feel it. To just see a picture, they may not get that, but they, as they experience just someone being in that presence. And really, that's what a dominatrix is. You can have all the costume, but if you can't back it up with bringing the goods, and this, like, it's being present, being here, being willing to hold the container and not take anybody's bullshit. That's, without making them wrong, right? Like it's that piece. If you don't have that, you are not a dominant. I don't care how you're dressed.
Yeah. I love that, because I think a lot of women in particular sometimes have a hard time with not taking bullshit. And what I love, not just that, there's so many things I love. It's another thing I'm going to say probably 50 times. And I noticed we have some more people joining us. So I want to just say again, and this actually weaves into my next question or statement, that Dana grew up in a cult, and to heal from that oppression, she became, fundamentally, she ended up becoming a dominatrix. So it's very short, very short version of the story. Like, really.
Yeah.
What I wonder for you, especially when you're working with your clients, is how often the mirroring of almost like the cult-like tendencies that a lot of women feel, some of that oppression or that invisible they, maybe it wasn't specifically a cult for them, but a lot of women who feel responsible for other people's feelings, responsible for how other people see them, responsible for not rocking the boat, responsible for not hurting people, thinking that other people's responses to them is their responsibility in any form, and how prevalent that is in our culture. And so I wonder, for you, having grown up in a cult, how many similarities do you actually see with the women that you have worked with?
Absolutely. Because, I mean, the cult, I think, just takes that oppression piece to another level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's less covert
Mm-hmm.
and more overt.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can really point to it. You can put your finger directly on and say, these behaviors, right? There were no female leaders. In the event that there was no man available to lead, a meeting, then, a woman could do it, but only if she put a hat on.
Oh, wow.
Which is really, it's a little fucked up, right? But it was like little things where it was like, you're not even good enough on your own. You've got to put a hat on to be sort of good enough. And then it's only because it's right. So like there are a lot of messages. And I think if people haven't grown up in a cult, I think the messages are much more covert, unless you happen to have grown up in a family where it was very overt, that it was like, you're a woman, you're worth nothing. But I think as a society, we've taken this on. And I also think as a society, there is this, an expectation and a norm in that women are nurturers. And so we crave community. We crave to build that community. And in building a community, we see this desire to have people get along. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we mistaken that piece of like, I need people to get along, and move that into, I can't rock the boat. And where I really want to see people step into is, this space of, let's say you and I have something going on as like, Katie, I have an issue with you. And, to be able to have that conversation, to be able to like sit down with you and say, Katie, I have an issue with something that you're doing. And you actually can, open up, receive that, and then say, and then we can take it further. And instead of the typical, what happens is that it's like, well, you're doing blah, 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 like, crap it all over to somebody else.
Yeah.
But if we really want to build a strong community, then what's more powerful is when women can sit down together and say, I love you, and this is bugging me, but it doesn't negate my love for you, and it doesn't mean I'm leaving you. And when we can start doing that, we can start holding each other accountable without making them wrong. Then we will have really powerful conversations. And collectively, and I know you are totally with me, but collectively we will move up when we can do that, when we can take personal responsibility beyond the beating ourselves up personal responsibility, right?
Big time.
I know you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We could go off on a whole other hour for that.
For sure.
But moving it, and my big piece is the non-judgment, right? When we can actually get to that space of no judgment for other people, it changes our lives. It changes how we show up, what we say, how we say it.
Yeah.
All of those.
1,000,000%. And that's why I noted when you were talking about in your work, as when you were, let's say, practicing dominatrix, and part of that was like, we're not making anyone wrong here. And that's actually one of my big things in the world too, and in the work that I do, and what I work through sometimes on my own, still, of course, I'll catch myself. That's usually comes up for me more politically. I'm not going to lie. That's where my little button has been on that.
We can work on that Mr. T thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just saying.
So that's definitely where I have to come out of the right and wrong. But it is a great lesson for me because in general, a lot of my life practice and my unraveling has been about not making anyone wrong and not making anyone right, which is actually one of the memes I put up this morning. And it's part of that included not making myself right or wrong. But it literally means not right either. It's right. It's like, okay, I don't have to make you wrong, but I also don't have to make me right. Sometimes those things are almost different.
That's the tricky one. I found that one really sticky. It took me a while to really untangle from the piece of like, and it still tricks me every once in a while where I feel this need to be right because, and here's what I think is that it's like over and over again, we are made wrong, we are made wrong, we are made wrong. So when we get something that we think we have right, oh man, do we hang on to that tightly? Like, and that righteous indignation energy comes in and we just hang on to that for dear life. I'm not giving this up because damn it, I'm right.
Yes.
Finally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet you're not right because you're never right. So, which is a whole, again, we could just like sidebar for an hour on that one. I know.
We could. Yeah.
There's so many things you and I, like we align so well and we could definitely talk for hours.
So many tangents, so little time.
I know, right?
And that's not righteous at all. No, I'm kidding.
Not at all.
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. So I noticed that you will reference narcissism and the healing from narcissism in a lot, or not a lot, but some of your posts. I'd love to hear a little bit more how that fits into your work and how that sort of entered your world.
So I grew up with a narcissist. My stepmother was definitely in that range. My father, I would, he hasn't been diagnosed, but I would put him as a sociopath. So it's a very interesting combination, those two growing up with. And then I got involved with a narcissist, albeit one that's lower on the scale. So he was a little nicer, but still crazy making. So I'm very aware of the pattern and, having got stuck in that relationship for 11 years, even though, yes, I'm not the victim, but I still felt, while I was in there, I felt
it feels like
stuck.
A vortex.
It feels like a vortex.
And it sucks you back in.
It does. It really does. So I get that patterning. I get where it feels like you're out of control, where you feel like you have no power, and the dynamic of what is going on. So in healing from that, I did a lot of research as to what this personality is about, what's really going on, what's the dynamic, and getting to understand all of the things. And, there's tons of information. And what I find is that for most people, that information puts them into a place of feeling powerless again, because it feels like I'll never break free. There's so many of them. They're such assholes. They do terrible things. But where I love my branding is that when you step into becoming, not becoming a dominatrix, but like leaning into the inner dominatrix, that archetype, you become unattractive to the narcissist. When you actually stand authentically in who you are, what you're about, where you're going, you are not easily manipulated. And if you're not easily manipulated, they don't want to be around you. They're lazy.
Yeah.
Here's the great thing. They're lazy people. So if you're not an easy target, they're moving on.
Yeah.
So for me, I love that piece, but I realize that where my skill set is that the people who are really ready to break free, right? If you're still in the place where you need to be angry, like great, play that out for a while. When you're ready to stop being angry and start getting over it, then, because otherwise I'll just trigger the fuck out of you, right? Like, let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, I get that. So, well, because I think, in some of what we're talking about, I think about the victim archetype and the prostitute archetype, but I always look at how there's another side to those. There's the victim that becomes victor, and then there's the prostitute who's the sacred prostitute. And I think that there's something very empowering about sort of reaching the other side of the spectrum of those places, because I firmly believe and it's not that I feel dualistic about it, but I really feel strongly that you can't have one without the other. Like, we are the totality of the spectrum. We're the black, we're the white, and we're everything in between. It's all, the all is in the small, the all is in the all. And it's the prostitute in us that will give up parts of ourselves for something else in exchange. It's usually some kind of power struggle. It's the sacred prostitute that knows our worth and is like, no, I'm worth more than that. I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving that up for anyone. And there's the victim who likes to be in that victim place, loves to blame, loves to point the finger, is where they're comfortable. But when you have access to the victim, you have access to the victor. That's like, nobody's right and nobody's wrong. And it's like, I wrote in my Facebook post, but it's not a question of who's right and wrong. It's, can I be with this? Can I be at peace with this? Does this work for me? Because I think that that's the ultimate litmus test. It's not about, like, I think where I lived for a long time is like, okay, well, you're not wrong, but I'm right.
I don't know that one at all.
Right? It's like,
I've never lived there, Katie. I don't know.
Right.
Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
No. The question is, does this resonate with you exactly as it is in this moment? And you know, we empower ourselves to say yes or no, and then we move from there. But that is the ultimate question. And I think it always comes back to us being more internal than external. You know, I mean, we live in a world that's so externally focused. Oh, holy cow. And it's like, that's all just a distraction to point us outside of ourselves. And I think if we just, you know, if we can look outside of ourselves, but I always look just more, or I remember to look outside of myself just as feedback. It's just feedback that I bring back into myself, and I say, is this working for me? Does that resonate with me? Do I want that in my bubble? Am I showing up the way that I want to show up? Am I getting the things in my life that I want to be getting? And if I'm not, what's going on with me that I'm not? So I feel like it's really just input to go back in, but not a place that we're supposed to stay out there. I think that's an easy hook for a lot of people, and it's very nuanced, but I really feel like there's a lot of gems in that the external world really is a mirror. That's it. It's not meant to be where we live.
Yes. I love that, because you know, and it's so funny because, like, the whole distractions things have been driving me crazy. I just posted on the weekend, you know, my husband and I went for breakfast. We love this little breakfast place. It's so, you know, quaint in the decorations. Everything has been nicely laid out. The staff is great. Food is great. The coffee's great. Like, it hits a triple win for me. Because so many places have good food but crappy coffee.
Oh yeah, no.
Right?
Can't have that.
And, you know, everything's a win. And then they have these stupid TVs that are just news.
Oh, no.
Constant CTV news, constant with the ticker tape thing down below, and all the, you know, 16 screens going with then a little flashy, and I this is my weak spot, right? Like, it's really hard for me to be in a room where there's a TV and not be like,
right,
zombied. So, you know, and there's nowhere you can sit in the restaurant and not be facing a screen. I'm like, it's anyway. So I just did a big rant on that. It's like, we are constantly distracted, and and then wonder why most of the world is raging and you know, flares up with the slightest little social media post and just goes
right.
Right.
They just unleash the week worth of anger that they didn't process, or even just energy. Sometimes it's not even energy or rage, right? It's pent up energy that they don't know what else to do with, so that they just act with what they have access to. And it often will come out as just at someone else. Yeah. So Eileen put up a comment saying, I think compassion is the key to moving forward with conflict. What do you say about that?
Okay, so this can be a potential landmine because it depends on how you use the word compassion. I
knew you were going to say that. Yes.
Right? I'm like, because like this is where, you know, you and I can get into big rants about the positivity crowd. So a lot of the positivity crowd, well, you just have to have compassion for them, right? It becomes this blanket that we throw over things, right? I'm going to throw this blanket over this pig that's in the middle of the room, and we're going to pretend that the pig doesn't exist. But compassion is, to me, like a compassion that works is to step back and say, okay, it's not about me. They've got their stuff going on. If I pull back my reaction and start to, you know, flip it around, like you say, flip it around and look in the mirror, what is it about that's triggering for me? Holding space for them to be in whatever shit they're in without needing to fix it or change it. So, and again, I just pulled a reference from my time as a dominatrix, you know, like if you were in scene, like we would often have play parties where there's like, you got to imagine this big space or, you know, multiple level houses, and you've got scenes going on everywhere where everybody's, you know, there's different things. And so you need to focus just on your scene. So right next door, you could have somebody that's having like a big screaming flail out, but both of you need to stay focused on what's going on here in order for your scene to work. And so it's that holding that space. It's very powerful. Like that's why I love this.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many great metaphors, right? And tangible for people. And sometimes the woo stuff is not always tangible. So I think that compassion is that holding that space, that it's like, okay, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. You just have whatever reaction you need to have, but I don't need to fix you. I don't need to change you. I can just love you as you are. To me, that's compassion. But I think, like I said, a lot of people do compassion in that, oh, you poor thing, and think that's being compassionate. It's like, no, actually, that is a condescending spiritual bitch.
Yeah. It's funny, just before the first time holding space came out of your mouth, Eileen posted compassion while holding space. And it was like, just as the words were leaving your mouth, it came up on the feed.
Okay. Sorry.
I giggled. I was like, there we go, of course.
Yeah. I mean, you should know that anybody following the two of us is going to be probably aligned with what we're thinking.
Right.
Just in case there's somebody watching who's not willing to comment.
Yes, exactly.
Just clarify.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel the same way about even the whole conversation and concept around love. It's a very similar one where, you know, some people just want to approach everything with this warm blanket of love, thinking that it's soft and fuzzy. And I know that if I have something really compelling, my love can be incredibly fierce and very fiery and very powerful. And that is love in its fullest. Sometimes it's soft and nurturing and warm and fuzzy and little bunnies and rainbows. Other times it's going to feel like a fire cannon flying at your face. So I think it's really important to not just think that we can love the world into a better place in the way that a lot of people mean it, which, I mean, the intentions are good, and I bless that. And I think having such high intentions is like, that's perfect. And sometimes my love looks like a very ballsy action or a force behind it, because love is that strong too. It's powerful. And I feel like compassion, it's a very similar conversation.
Yeah. I think there's times when, like, I think of it as tough love, right? You know, you've got teenage girls, and there are times where you have to be, you know, that fierce mama bear with your girls, because that's what's required. You know, I get it sometimes with my clients, and I think we need to do this in community as well, you know, is to really hold each other accountable and saying, no, I don't think this is okay, and I think you're better than this, and I want you to step up, and I'm going to hold the space to make it possible for you to step up. But rest assured, that's where you're going.
Absolutely.
I love you.
Right. Exactly. Where it's, you know, love and compassion can be great enablers, because we get them really confused and they get really tangled, and that can be a very slippery slope. And I find that a lot of it, and this is just my opinion, but I feel like a lot of emotional and spiritual maturity is about adapting to the nuances. There's so many nuances to all of this that are, it's similar to intuition that is typically, it's something that a lot of us sense or perceive, and it's literally a subtler energy. And I find that the nuances of maturing in these ways are also subtle. They're powerful beyond measure, but they're so subtle that it's like, I think that's part of why being present in ourselves and knowing how to be quiet in ourselves and to know ourselves in particular ways is so that we can navigate those subtleties. I really think a lot of it is about that.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you're talking about, the nuances and the subtleties, because, I think when you're first starting out in your journey, this is what I experienced. I'll speak to my journey anyway, is that, at the beginning, there's like these big leaps and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Oh, I've shifted.
The pink cloud.
I've shifted. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Right. You're like, whoa, all this stuff. And then, you kind of get a good body of work done. And then it becomes about just those little tweaks, those little refinements, or looking at some of the things that you didn't want to acknowledge before, like where you don't want to give up being right, or where, there's little pieces that it's just those subtleties of saying, okay, how else can I just tweak it just that tiny little bit to get another 2 RPM out of this engine, right? Instead of it going from, 2 RPM to 60 RPM, it's like you're just refining it, just those little bits. And I think understanding that also it's that proportional piece that, in the beginning, it feels much bigger because where you were and where you're going, the difference is more dramatic. I think there's still just as big of a jump, but because of all of the work that we've done, it's not as noticeable.
I agree. And what I think is interesting is in some ways I feel like also I'll speak for myself. My ego sort of needed to feel that quantum shift in that pink cloud because I needed to feel some sense of result, that something was going on, that something was happening. And then there was a time, a good probably couple of years, where I feel like my spirituality was still infused with enough ego, because I do think the ego is just as smart and spiritual as we are. The ego just gets smarter. And I'm not someone who bashes the ego. I think we need the ego. I do. And it's one of those things for myself I've had to watch, meaning, my ego wanting these big ahas or these big quantum shifts, and to have that feeling again, to give me this tangible, like, oh, okay, now I know I got it, right? Where it was part of the pulling away from having the ego own me rather than partnering with it and using it when it's appropriate and important, is remembering to go, oh, when my ego is really craving that, it's actually just pointing me to go in and ask, what's the part of me that really needs this bigness right now? Where can I point myself into something a little bit softer? Because I do find that some of my most powerful truths are these little kernels that are hiding behind this desire for something big, when it's really just this little seed hiding in there, and it's hiding, and I would miss it if I didn't get quiet and go, oh, right, the desire for bigness is just asking me to get quiet and still and see what's hiding in there.
I love this.
Yeah.
Which is why you and I just click.
That's why we click. That's why we talk. Now, Karen says something interesting. She says, detachment from the issue. If we can step back and see what triggers are, what the triggers are about, and why are they attached to the certain issue. Had this happened to me a couple of weeks ago. Somebody reacted so over the top to a post I put on Facebook. She was definitely attached to the issue and very blinded by her emotion. And I love the way she puts blinded by her emotion, because I think that there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that, but I think personally, I think a lot of that speaks to that external focus and not necessarily staying in our own development, our own spiritual and personal development, to understand when we even need to pull the valve on our own little pressure cooker, right? Like we all need these outlets. We all need, there's so much I feel like that we require that we kind of take for granted. It's like, I mean, you were a massage therapist, right? It's like people who think massages are just these froofy things, where really in an ideal scenario, it's like, no, it's like for me going to the chiropractor on a regular basis, I've learned is just part of the way that I keep myself vital and literally aligned. It was like, hello, what? But this is like basic self-care stuff. And it all happens here at home inside of this.
And that whole piece of, people love to talk about mind-body connection. Well, if you take care of the physical body takes care of the emotional body, takes care of the spiritual body. Like that's that mind-body connection as well.
Yeah.
That we can actually have spiritual change through taking care of ourselves physically and taking care of ourselves mentally. It's all of it.
It's all of it. And we can't afford to compartmentalize. And I think you of all people know this, but I think people don't realize how much our bodies literally inform our minds and then our spirit. Our bodies are informing so much. It's not, there's this misnomer that our minds are informing everything. And I think that that's a really sad pitfall, because we're literally operating on all of these levels simultaneously, and they're all giving feedback. The body gives so much feedback. And before we get illness, it's not just when we get illness. Like if I'm sitting slouched like this, my mind is going to start going, wow, I'm kind of depressed today. I'm kind of, feeling just like sluggish and slow. If I go like this, it's like, oh, I perked up a little bit.
Yeah. And it's just so fascinating. Like I would always see people when I did massage that were what we called the desk jockeys. They would sit for 8 hours, and periodically throughout the day it was like, oh my God, I gotta go get this. And so they'd spring out of the desk and go run for something and come back, and it's like there's no warm up, no nothing. And then they're like, why are my hamstrings so tight? And I'm like, well, because you're compressed all the time, and then you try to spring up all of a sudden when they're like ready to just go right. And I think there's an awareness too for people. This is some of my from that past. It's like we need to take care of our bodies. There's a reason why the body likes to move. And if we are spending all our time on the computer, on our phones, hunched over, we're going to change the physiology, and then we're going to change the mental state, and we're going to change our spiritual state. So if we open up, we also open up energetically. We open up emotionally, all of the things. So, it's one of the easiest ways for people to start changing their lives is to change how you hold your body. Start moving. Go for a walk. Get outside.
I love that.
Or go masturbate.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Do something.
Yep. I love that. So as we're starting to wind down, I'd love to hear about any projects you're working on or anything that you're just particularly passionate about right now.
So behind me, we've got the Become a Badass in Business book. So this is the first of the Inner Dominatrix guide.
It's really good. We'll make sure it's in the show notes if you're listening on playback, and we'll make sure it's on the Facebook feed.
Fabulous. So people can actually get a digital copy for free. It's innerdominatrix.com. You go there. There's a link. You can get the book for free. And then I'm working on the audio version.
Oh, nice.
Recording that. Yeah. So that'll be coming out in April, which I'm very excited about. Yay!
That's awesome. I'm a big audiobook fan, so I love that.
I know, I am too, and I know a lot of people are, would much rather do an audiobook. And I think for me, because so much of my story is woven in on this, that I think it'll have a different impact for people to listen to it as opposed to just reading it. And I know a lot of people who know me really well, they said as they were reading the book, they could hear me. They could hear my voice, which is lovely.
I love that.
So I'm quite excited about that.
That is exciting. Cool. And are you working with new clients? Are you taking clients,
I
and who
am.
do you love to work with?
So the ideal client for me is, a woman that I would say is kick-ass. So somebody who's got a lot of energy as far as like, she's got a big mission. You want to be going big in the world. You want to have a big impact. So maybe you're making lots of money right now, maybe you're not, but it's that desire to really make a big impact in the world, and knowing that we need to get you prepped and ready
Mm.
to be able to show up in the way that will allow you to just keep going. So that's what I love. Quite often, women that I work with have had sexual trauma in their past, because
Mm-hmm.
that's a big part of what I do and who I am.
Mm-hmm.
A healer for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a piece, and that piece, it's so interesting. It's often a stopping point for women in particular to close sales. If that hasn't
Oh,
moved, it's really
I
hard
get
to
that.
receive money. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to ask for the sale, and that's can be a real big tripping point.
That's really important. That's really valuable. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Any
my
last
pleasure. Thank you.
pearls? Anything?
One of my favorite quotes from me,
Yay. All the better.
yay, is oh, when you're willing to lose everything, you can have anything.
Hmm. That is the perfect close. I love that. I'm going to chew on that one all day.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
love
you,
you.
Dana. I love you too. And we'll make sure that all of your info is out there so everyone can find your book, find you. Just you're such a light in the world. And I love that I have the pleasure of calling you a personal friend. So thank you.
Same here.
All right. Take care. And bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.